Hey my spookies, before we start today's show I want to give you an update on my dog Chicano's battle against cancer, and it is going very well. He has 2 treatments left of chemotherapy, and it really is going great. And I want to say a humongous thank you to everybody who's helping me pay for these massive veterinary bills. We've raised $3,631. That's amazing. That's almost half of the cost. So if you want to help in any way possible, any amount, just go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Help My Dog. It really means the world to me. But now, my friends, it's time for a scare. A dog is a phenomenal companion. It's always there by your side, standing with you against just about anything, barking to warn you when something dangerous is going on, but there's always a divide. There's always that element of the fact that you can't truly communicate, and sometimes you simply don't know what's going on in their minds.
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for a little spooky in your weekly. I'm your host and narrator Enrique Couto, and we have quite a treat for you tonight. We have a brand new story from Charles Campbell, and many of you may know Charles from his great books, but also his podcast, Horror 421, where he interviews people of the horror genre and beyond, including yours truly. If you haven't checked out Horror 421 on your favorite podcasting app, I do recommend that you do so, and hey, tell them Weekly Spooky sent you, because they are about the best kind of friend you can have, a friend who writes scary stories for you and also involves you in their own podcast. Beyond that, I want to mention a big thank you for listening to the show, because that's what it's all about, filling your ears with some spooky fun times. And hey, if you love what we're doing, make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app, because there's plenty more to come, including a very special surprise for our 200th episode, but I'm not quite ready to reveal that yet. And hey, while you're on your podcasting app and you're subscribed, why not leave us a 5-star rating? It costs you nothing, and it helps new people discover the show all the time. Whether on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartMedia, any of them, a little rating goes a long way. And of course, if you want to support us in a more direct way, you can join 94 other patrons over on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get bonus podcasts, bonus episodes, and so much more. In fact, we have some new things getting ready to drop over at Patreon, and I assure you, you won't want to miss them. Just go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. You'll be helping us out in a major way and guaranteeing we hit our 200 episodes and so far beyond. But now, my friends, I think the weather's getting ready to turn. It must be time for a scary story after these quick words. I Know Who You Are by Charles Campbell. It was midday, and it was time for Rita to walk her hyper beagle. His name is Miller. You'd think the pooch may have gotten his name from the famous beer, but nah, Miller was Rita's last name. She adopted the pet from a friend of a friend when he was a pup, and thought her last name was as good as any. Certainly easy to remember. Miller was just a pup when she got him. Now he was almost 18 months old. He had to smell everything, so a tight rein on the leash was necessary. Today, Rita's grip wasn't as tight as it should have been. Miller caught a scent while Rita was looking at her phone, and he ripped the leash from her hand. "Miller!" Rita uselessly hollered after the determined hound. He darted into the woods behind Summit Homes Retirement Center. Rita ran after him, trying to gain a grip on the dangling leash. The boy was fast, and he was on a mission. Miller moved quickly around the trees and thick brush. He was tracking. Rita knew it, but as she chased, she was confused. Normally, when Miller caught a scent, it was a slow, determined march toward its source, until she gave a firm tug on the leash to change his course. Miller would exhibit his hell-bent behavior when he locked on a target like a squirrel or a cat, but as far as Rita could tell, it wasn't an animal or creature that caused him to tear away from her. Miller hit another patch of heavy brush, howling all the way. Rita was tiring. She wouldn't be able to keep pace much longer. Miller was out of her view for the first time. Rita's heart raced as her mind jumped to conclusions, and her heart sank when she heard his yelp, followed by whimpering, and then silence. Rita tore through the brush, with no regard to the scratches she was getting all over her face and arms. All that mattered was her dog. She burst around a tall pine, and a wave of relief washed over her. Miller was standing in a clearing, his tail wagging. "Miller, come here, boy!" Rita yelled, hands on her knees. She could feel trickles of blood all over her arms and face. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the pain was setting in. Rita felt the world go black as she stumbled toward Miller, before falling to the ground. A few minutes later, Rita's eyes fluttered. She felt the lapping tongue of Miller soaking the side of her face. "Hey, boy," Rita said as she slowly pushed herself to her feet. She felt for Miller's leash and got a grip. "Let's not do that again, okay?" she asked the panting dog. It was now on her to-do list to get a GPS tracker to attach to Miller's collar, just in case. Rita couldn't imagine life without him. They walked together out of the woods. Later that night, Rita was in a deep sleep, until she wasn't. She heard the low growl in Miller's throat against her ear. Rita opened her eyes. "What's wrong, boy?" she asked as she turned on the bedside lamp. Miller leapt from the bed, followed by the click-clack of his nails on the wood floor. Rita rolled out of bed, slid her feet into bedroom slippers, and followed Miller down the hall. His nose was to the floor. He found a scent. Rita thought that was weird. They were the only two that lived in the small house, and she hadn't had a visitor in God knows how long. Miller was sniffing in circles on the living room floor. The little whine that preludes a howl was coming from his mouth in an agitated cadence. Miller started clawing at the hardwood as if he were digging one of his many holes in the backyard. "Miller, stop that! These floors cost a small fortune," Rita said as she knelt beside her anxious dog. He didn't look up at her. He just kept clawing at the floor. Rita lifted him, and Miller was squirming for all he was worth. He was growling again, and Rita was beginning to think that this dog she raised from a pup was about to bite her. "Miller!" Rita raised her voice to get his attention. To no avail. He tumbled and turned in her arms. She said the last word she thought may get him to calm down. "Kennel, Miller! You're going in the kennel if you don't cut out this nonsense!" Miller hadn't been in the kennel for a good long while. Rita really couldn't remember the last time she actually used it, but it was still set up in the spare bedroom. Miller howled before he nipped at Rita's face. Fortunately for her, she moved out of his path at the last second. She was dumbstruck. Never in a million years would she have thought Miller would bite her. Not in his right doggy mind, anyways. "Okay, Miller. Sorry, bud, but you left me no choice," Rita said, half angry, but full of concern at Miller's behavior. Miller kept thrashing as Rita made her way to the kennel. He was howling and carrying on as Rita pushed him through the cage door and locked it. Miller was panting furiously. Now that he was caged, he was also trembling. Rita thought about taking him to the emergency vet and have him looked at right then and there, but the rumble of thunder and sound of heavy rain weighed in on her decision to take him to the vet first thing in the morning. Rita would use a sick day. She had plenty of them to burn. Actually, she never used one, so if she called in sick, her boss would know that it was not a lie to get a free day off. He wouldn't question her, not in the least. 2 hours later. Sleep abandoned Rita the second Miller woke up. She laid in the twin-sized bed in the spare bedroom and listened as Miller whined. Rita wasn't going to leave him in the room alone. He was practically her child. Miller continued to cry as Rita stared in the kennel's direction. She wanted to say something to comfort the dog, but she knew the words would be wasted and may just agitate him more than he already was. She would stick to the plan. The vet would be open in a few hours. She'd take him in. A thought ran through her mind. Rita wondered if something rabid may have bitten him when he took off into the woods. Miller was up to date on his shots, but Rita was one not to completely trust vaccines or really modern medicine. She gave him a good looking over, but maybe she missed something. Maybe he was hallucinating. Maybe he was poisoned. Maybe he was dying. The thoughts of doom and gloom were now a storm in Rita's mind. She sat up on the edge of the bed. Miller was still whining. She looked toward the kennel and gasped when she saw red, glowing eyes staring back at her. Rita decided she couldn't wait until the vet office opened. Miller had to be seen right now. She bolted from the bed and turned on the lights. Miller's teeth were bared, and the whine turned into a full-on growl. "My boy, what's wrong with you?" Rita asked, looking at Miller. She left the room to retrieve his leash. His growls turned to howling. Rita rushed back in with leash in hand. "Okay, Miller, we're going to get you some help, okay?" Rita held up the leash, which usually elicited frantic tail wagging from Miller. But not this time. He continued to howl. Rita shuffled closer to the kennel. All of a sudden, Miller stopped howling and moved toward the kennel door. Rita released the latch and eased the door open. Miller looked at her and stepped forward. With a trembling hand, Rita clasped the leash onto Miller's collar. His tail wasn't wagging, but he was no longer growling or howling. "Let's go, boy." Rita disabled the alarm and Miller followed her to the front door when she realized it was still raining. She grabbed the umbrella beside the coat rack and opened the door. As soon as they stepped outside, Miller took off like a bullet. Even though Rita had the firmest of grips on the leash, Miller ripped it from her hands with strength he'd never exhibited before. "Miller!" Rita shouted as she watched him dash up the street and turn the corner. "Damn it all to hell!" Rita shouted to the still dark sky. She rushed to the car and sped out of the driveway. Rita turned the corner on West Avenue and could make out the reflective leash being dragged behind the frantic beagle. He was going back into the woods. Rita spun into the Summit Homes Retirement Center, almost slamming her car into the retirement home sign. For the second time, she chased her dog through the woods. "Row! Row!" Miller was howling furiously. If Rita weren't under such duress of the moment, she would liken it to an old horror movie she recently watched where the hounds caught scent of the werewolf. Rain fell in sheets as thunder rumbled, lightning cracked. The mag light she kept in the glove compartment of her car was coming in very handy. She was getting totally soaked as she'd left the umbrella behind, which was the least of her concerns. She was scared for Miller and herself. Rita could still see the leash, and from what she could remember, Miller was taking the same path as before. Even with the fresh rush of adrenaline, Rita could feel the pain from the scrapes and cuts from her earlier chase rising in her brain. They were almost to the clearing where Miller stopped before. Rita tore through the brush and stumbled. She fell to her knees. The leash was no longer moving. Rita raised her head. Miller was standing 50 feet in front of her. He wasn't alone. "What the hell?" Rita mumbled as she shined the light. Her mind was having a very hard time registering what was in front of her. It was another dog. And from what she could see, he was the spitting image of Miller. A leash also trailed behind him, and there was a person on their knees in the distance behind him. Miller raised his nose to the sky, and the other dog did the same. It was as if Miller were moving in front of a mirror. Rita stood, and so did the unknown person. I must be dreaming. What the hell is happening? "Miller, come here, boy!" Miller didn't turn to her. He kept sniffing the air along with his doppelganger. They were so close to each other, noses only a couple of inches from touching. The person behind the doppelganger stepped forward in unison with Rita. She thought about bolting, but she would not leave her boy. That was, and forever would be, her child. She marched toward her dog, as did the person behind the doppelganger. Miller was growling. Rita grabbed the leash and tried to pull. He was like a heavy stone in mud. Miller wouldn't budge. "Oh my God," Rita whispered. Miller's eyes glowed red once again. The beast standing in front of him was also growling, with yellow eyes. "Who are you?" Rita asked the woman standing across from her. The woman looked like Rita, but didn't. Her hair was darker, her eyes were sunken in, and her clothes hung on her as if they were wearing her and not the other way around. "I know who you are," the figure said. "What? Who are you?" Rita asked. The dogs both broke into full-on howls. Rita was sure that someone was going to hear all this commotion and call the police. Rita pulled once again on the leash, but Miller was lost in his howling duel with his doppelganger. "I know who you are!" the figure shouted, followed by a guttural scream. Rita wanted oh so badly to drop that leash, but she held on. The dogs weren't touching, but were as close as they could be without making contact. "Stop it!" Rita screamed. The rain fell harder, the dogs got louder, and the figure got closer. Lightning popped in the sky. Rita got a look at the woman's face. It was a mixture of rotting flesh with maggots moving inside the caverns of her cheeks. Rita jerked the leash with all her might. Miller yelped as he pulled backward. She jarred him out of his trance with the doppelganger. Miller retreated to his master's side. Rita fell on her ass in the slop of the ground. Miller was whining, but this was a whine of fear. The figure was moving closer with her dog. "Rita, I know who you are. You claimed my life as your own," the figure said. Rita's mind was on fire. "I know who you are. You're me, and I am you. I'm back to claim what's mine," the figure said. "I'm dreaming, no doubt about it," Rita said as she took a deep breath, awaiting the relief of her waking up. She closed her eyes. The rain still fell. She wasn't waking up. She opened her eyes. The woman with the rotting face was standing over her. Her dog was shoulder to shoulder with the trembling Miller. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to," Rita sobbed. Her past transgression was now staring her right in the face. You see, her name wasn't really Rita. Her name was Frida. And Frida, well, She killed her twin sister, stole her puppy, and assumed her life. She'd been savvy enough to get away with it, but she wasn't counting on this woman's love for her dog. A love that no grave could hold. It was a love that would right the wrong. Meaning has nothing to do with it, Frida, Rita said. A maggot fell from her face and landed on Frida's cheek. She swatted it and felt the squish under her palm. You did it, and I'm taking it back. Rita grabbed Frida by her wrist and drug her along the wet ground. The leashes were released and the dogs walked behind them. Miller and his doppelganger merged together, becoming one as they crossed the barrier between the living and the dead. The woman's face was healing itself. The maggots were vaporizing and her body filled the hanging clothes. Frida, on the other hand, was screaming in pain. Her face was being ripped to pieces from the inside. Maggots flailed across her tongue. Frida felt her bones pushing through her skin. She wanted to scream, but her mouth wouldn't work. Rita pulled her across death's dimension and let go of Frida's wrist. She grabbed the leash, turned toward Frida, smiled to let her know that she didn't get away with it. And Miller followed her back to the land of the living. 2 hours later, Rita woke up and stretched her arms. Miller was wagging his tail. He was ready for their morning walk. You don't want breakfast first? Rita asked. Miller, with his tail still wagging, walked toward the front door. Okay, we'll walk first then, Rita said, grinning. They walked down the street, turned the corner on West Avenue. Miller paused in front of Summit Homes Retirement Center. Some of the workers were pulling into the parking lot, and Miller could smell breakfast cooking. It was time for the old folks to eat. Miller tugged a little on the leash, and Rita held firm. Oh no, she's not going to take you again, my boy. She'll never take you again. Some stories are just purely scary, in the purest sense of the word, like the old stories about the hook hanging on the car handle or the bloody mirror that says humans can lick too. And this story, I feel, falls into that sweet spot of simple and truly scary. And also, it's about dogs, which, as you know, I'm very fond of my dogs. In fact, I had to stop recording because my dog Henwolf started sneezing uncontrollably during the recording. So it was almost like being in 4D for me, reading a story about a dog, and then my dog started going ape. But I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I did. And remember, Charles Campbell has a great podcast called Horror 421, just waiting for you to listen. So make sure to check that out on your favorite podcasting app. And again, huge thank you, speaking of dogs, to everybody who's helped me raise money to pay for my dog Chicano's cancer treatment. I really am floored by all the help I've gotten, and I just want to say an absolute and positive thank you. And speaking of thanks, I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names on the show. And they are Bobbletopia.com, where Weekly Spooky as the code at checkout can get you 10% off and throw 10% our way. Megan Hua, Julia Kirsch, Christopher Sullivan, Brent McCullough, Gino Lyons, Steve King, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much. And if you want to join that illustrious list of spookies, just go to weeklyspooky.com, click on Patreon, and for any pledge over $15 a month, your name will be on the show. But now, my friends, it's about time I get out of here. I've got a lot of work to do. We have something very scary dropping this Friday as a surprise, so don't tell anyone. But until next time, my friends, for myself, for my producer Dan Wilder, my executive producer Rob Fields, our composer Ray Mattis, and of course, my dogs Henwolf and Chicano, we will talk at you next time.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.